Welcome to Building Community Resilience. My name is Ivan Idso from Rochester, Minnesota, and I've been involved with sustainability for a long time. I'm very passionate about it. My career as a biomedical electronic technician working on medical equipment. I was a chair of a national group, the Association for the Advancement of Medical Instrumentation Sustainability Committee for a couple of years. I retired about 2 years ago, and I renovated my house. It was originally built in 1890. I made it super insulated, low energy, all electric vehicles, permaculture backyard, chickens, working with my community to work on resilience and community ed classes. So anyway, I'm here to kind of share what I've learned in my research over the last 10 to 15 years. So I hope you enjoy it. Community resilience is the ability of a community to maintain and evolve its identity in the face of both short-term and long-term changes. This is resilience, while cultivating environmental, social, and economic sustainability. So why is community resilience important? Let's look at 5 common beliefs and see why community resilience will be important. First, as long as we reduce our carbon emissions, then our planet will be okay. Second, our economy can grow at 3% forever. Third, we have hundreds of years of non-renewable resources left. Fourth, each generation will become increasingly prosperous. And finally, is Santa Claus real? So let's take a look at number 1. As long as we reduce our carbon emissions, then our planet will be okay. The chart on the right is called carbon tunnel vision. So we've been pretty much solely focused on reducing our carbon emissions to address climate change. But carbon emissions are only one symptom of the greater problem, which is our consumption. Other symptoms include resource scarcity, inequality, overconsumption, affordable goods and services, air pollutants, ecotoxicity, biodiversity loss, poverty, eutrophication, water crisis, health, and education. Therefore, only addressing climate change and carbon emissions will not solve our problem. Now let's look at number 2. Our economy can grow at 3% forever. This is a representation of how most of us view our economy. We have money, and with that money, we buy products and services. And we expect this to continue to grow at 3% forever, and that there's a limitless supply of money and products and services. So here's a representation of kind of what that looks like. But can it really grow forever? In 1972, MIT and the Club of Rome issued a report titled The Limits to Growth. In this study, they looked at resource use, they looked at our healthcare and education services per capita, food per capita, and industrial output per capita, and also population and pollution. And they ran several different scenarios. One of them actually was kind of if we had consumed less and managed our population, then our resource use would have leveled off, our population would have leveled off, and our pollution would have leveled off. But we didn't do that. So this is the business as usual scenario, where back when we had a lot of resources and they were inexpensive to extract, we were doing really good on services, goods and services. Food was going great. Population continued to increase, but also, as we see here, pollution was increasing. And so now we find ourselves here We've used about half of the planet's resources, known resources, and pollution is increasing. And at some point here, when it becomes too expensive to extract resources because of the lower quality and the cost to take care of pollution continues to increase, we start to see a decline in goods and services, which is GDP, food per capita, and eventually population and pollution will decline. And so our real society runs on energy and materials. Money is just a claim on energy. So we extract oil, fossil fuels, minerals. We use those to make products and services. And then the output of that is waste in the form of biodiversity loss, carbon emissions, plastic pollution, chemical pollution, socio-economic problems. So here's another representation of what the real society looks like. And so here we are today, 2024. We've extracted a lot of our resources. They're being depleted. It's costing more and more to extract them. Our goods and services, GDP, has continued to increase, but also our waste is getting worse off all the time. Now, if we continue consuming the way we have, what we'll notice is, just like in the MIT study, at some point, our goods and services, GDP, will start declining, and we'll continue to use more resources, and our waste will continue to increase. So what we're left with are depleted resources, a much smaller economy, and major pollution. This chart is just another way of representing this, and you can see that as our GDP, goods and services, increases, our energy consumption, carbon emissions, and ecological footprint also increase. Therefore, our economy can't grow forever and is limited by energy and resource availability, biodiversity loss, climate change, and pollution. So now let's take a look at number 3. We have hundreds of years of non-renewable resources left. The chart on the left here shows the global primary energy consumption by source from 1900 to now. And you can see that we've used in total 6 million terawatt hours since 1900. And it shows, the coal use, the oil use, the natural gas, nuclear, hydropower, and way up here is wind and solar. So you can see that in spite of all the progress we've made on wind and solar, a lot of our economy, the total energy, still runs on coal, oil, and natural gas. And when you think about it, when you look at this diagram, the energy used in this time period built a lot of our great cities, our highway systems. We fought 2 world wars and numerous other skirmishes: the Vietnam War, Afghanistan, Iraqi War. It's just kind of mind-boggling. Can this keep going on forever? So let's take a closer look at that. Oil is considered the master resource because everything else relies on oil. And so this chart here shows global oil discoveries, conventional crude discoveries, and production. And you can see that the majority of the oil was found prior to like 1970. And the production has continued to increase throughout that time. And recently, since the 1970s, we haven't been finding that much additional resources, in spite of investing more and more in trying to find it. Now this chart is a little different way of looking at it. The red line here shows cumulative discoveries, so you can see that over time we've discovered 2,167 gigabarrels of oil. The blue line shows how much we've used. So over, up until this time, we've used 1,380 gigabarrels. The green line is the difference between these two. So basically, how much we've got left. And you can see, since 1985, we've been finding less than we've been consuming. So we've been tapping into our reserves. So we're now down to about 786 gigabarrels left. So we've used about 2/3 of all the conventional crude that we know exists. So within the next decade, the cost and availability of oil will become a problem if we don't reduce our demand. Let's take another look at this chart, the global primary energy consumption by source. I was born in 1958, and in my lifetime so far, our energy consumption has doubled twice. So when I was born, we were consuming, less than 40 terawatt hours, and it doubled to 80 in about 1980, doubled again to 160,000 in, let's just say, 2015. So that is pretty incredible growth. So what if we continue to grow at 3%, which has been the average growth in our energy consumption? What does that look like? So I took that last chart, and in a spreadsheet, I increased that by 3% per year. And what you can see here is that it will double 3 more times before 2100, by 2045, again by 2068, and then 2092. So at 3% growth, energy use will double 3 more times by 2100, and this means that we will use 8 times more energy by 2100 than we've used since 1900. Is this possible? I don't think so. Number 4, each generation will become increasingly prosperous. This, I think, is the most important concept to understand what I'm going to be describing in the next couple of slides. And I feel it underpins a lot of the problems that we're seeing in our society today, and why it'll be increasingly important to have community resilience in the future. So I'm going to take my time on this and try to explain it as best I can. This chart by Art Berman shows the different types of oil. Well, first off, let me say that a lot of people think that all oil is the same, but nothing could be further from the truth. This gray line down here is the conventional oil that was found in vast magnitudes, and that's really cheap oil to extract. That's basically this oil right up here. You drill down a few hundred feet, and it just comes gushing out. And then next up here is the shallow water, like in the Gulf of Mexico, right off shore, and that's also pretty inexpensive to extract. And so that makes up a majority of all the oil we've had. Now, as we move along in time, this picture right here is a picture of oil sands, tar sands, and it's very energy intensive. A lot of hazardous materials are used in this. It's just in my opinion, a horrible way to extract oil. So what this, and so then as we go up here farther, now we're getting into using more of the unconventional. We're going, these right here are deeper offshore, up to, 5 miles deep. And then you get into our shale oil here, which has, been carrying the load here for the last 10 years. And then you got your oil sands up here and then biofuels. And you can see, our most inexpensive oils, which we really built our society on, have been in a steady decline since about 2005. And we're relying more on these more expensive to produce oils, non-conventional oils. Now this top line up here, this is the energy required to produce energy. Now you can see back here, 1970, even before that, it would take very little energy, and that's these wells like this, very little energy, and you got a lot of oil back. So maybe it took 1 barrel of oil worth of energy to get 100 barrels of oil. So that was really good. But this top line here, as we go along and we're incorporating more and more unconventional fuels, it's costing more and more to extract them. And that's basically like a tax on our civilization, because that increases the cost of our energy, of our oil and our energy. And now here we are, 2024, our cheapest oils are depleting. We're kind of at peak here. It's costing more and more energy to get the oil out of the ground. And when you look ahead here, by about, on this chart here, by about 2045, it's going to take a barrel of oil to get a barrel of oil out. So even though there's a lot of oil left after this, it's not going to be cost effective to use 1 barrel of oil to get a barrel of oil out of the ground. So remember that. Now, this chart by Dr. Tim Morgan of Surplus Energy Economics, I really like his work. This is basically our GDP output, and this is our prosperity. Okay, so here's back in the 1990s. We saw from the chart before that it didn't cost much to extract oil. So our cost of energy was much more affordable. So our essentials were pretty inexpensive. So we had a lot of extra money for investment and for discretionary spending, going on trips, buying boats, whatever. But as the cost of extraction increases, and like I said, that kind of puts a tax on everything, it affects our essentials first. And so it costs more and more for our essentials, and that leaves less and less for investment and discretionary spending. So this is why I think a lot of people are struggling now, that it's costing more and more for their essentials. They don't have enough, or even for their essentials, and that will continue to decline. So more of our available money will be needed for essentials, and prosperity will decline. And finally, number 5, Santa Claus is real. Well, I did a lot of research on this, and just decided, you just need to have a bit of faith, but it really does no harm whether you believe or not. But we can't leave the other 4 beliefs to chance. So these are my conclusions. We can't create a sustainable and resilient future by just focusing on climate change. Due to energy resource depletion, biodiversity loss, climate change, pollution, etc., our economy will stop growing whether we choose it or not. We do not have hundreds of years of non-renewable resources remaining, and we are already beginning to see the effects of depletion. And finally, our prosperity will diminish as the resources that make up our economy become more expensive to extract and less available. So we have ourselves in a real pickle. This society is neither resilient or sustainable. And in a report by Jason Hickel, he states, high-income countries will need to pursue post-growth demand reduction strategies, reorienting the economy towards sufficiency, equity, and human well-being, while also accelerating technological change and efficiency improvements. This is a picture I took over on Interstate 35, happened to be following a Target truck by Hope, Minnesota, and basically, we've been living for the last several hundred years with a target of perpetual growth and capitalism and continuous GDP growth. But if we want to have any hope, we really need to take this exit to a degrowth, post-carbon economy, post-capitalist economy, steady state economy, or beyond growth. Nate Hagens developed the Great Simplification concept, and in it he states, we are about to transition from the greatest concentration of energy and resources ever amassed on this planet by a species into something different because we cannot continue to grow. And Nate always talks about bend, don't break. So if we are prepared for the kind of changes that I'm talking about here, that a lot of people are talking about, the more prepared we are, our society will be able to bend rather than break. I want to read an excerpt from an essay by Rob Winberg titled The Great Paradox of Our Time. Our world is better off now than at any point in human history, but at the same time, things have never been worse. It's a contradiction that presents us with a seemingly unresolvable conundrum. The source of our progress has become the source of our downfall. Things are too good for us to change it all, yet too bad for us to leave anything as it is. This is the great paradox of modern times. Which brings us to the great irony of our modern paradox. In order to preserve the fruits of humanity's incredible growth, we have to leave it all behind. In order to keep moving forward, we have to go back to the drawing board. The engine that drives our civilization must be completely disassembled and replaced with a new model. Richard Heinberg is a senior fellow at the Post-Carbon Institute. And regarding building resilience, he states, building resilience at the community scale will be especially important. As global supply chains grow brittle and shatter, humanity will depend more upon local economies for survival and opportunities to thrive. Behaviors, attitudes, and strategies that seemed to make sense before need to be replaced by different attitudes, behaviors, and strategies, such as efforts to build resilience rather than continuing to invest in unsustainable growth. David Holmgren was a co-creator of the permaculture movement, and I think this will form a basis for our future society. David wrote a book several years ago called Retro Suburbia, and I'm going to play a little trailer for you because this is kind of how I envision perhaps our future will be.
The Australians have been living in a dream world of cheap energy, low interest rates and benign climates. But there are ominous signs of a weather change on multiple fronts. Retro Suburbia describes the patterns of retrofitting the house, garden and household that make for a better way of life now and build resilience to uncertain futures. In the suburbs around the country, the early adopters of a quiet revolution are getting their own house in order, growing and processing food, retrofitting buildings and sharing house to reduce debt rather than waiting for governments to provide answers. I anticipate a strengthening of neighbourhood sharing and in turn revitalised local livelihoods without the need to commute. My book balances the larger world context with local, practical and creative solutions to help people plan and work towards a more resilient future.
Transition Towns is a movement that has been growing since 2005. It's about communities stepping up to address the big challenges they face by starting local. By coming together, they're able to crowdsource solutions and seek to nurture a caring culture, one focused on supporting each other both as groups or as a wider communities. Transition groups are reclaiming the economy, sparking entrepreneurship, reimagining work, reskilling themselves, and weaving webs of connection and support. Rob Hopkins, who is the founder of Transition Towns and also a permaculturist, says that by loving and leaving all that oil has done for us, we are able to then begin the creation of a world which is more resilient, more nourishing, and in which we find ourselves fitter, more skilled, and more connected to each other. We need a new economy that does not rely on profits and growth exclusively. The Well-Being Economy Alliance states that a good economy is when the rules and incentives are designed to ensure everyone has enough to live in comfort, safety, and happiness. When people feel secure in their basic comforts and can use their creative energies to support the flourishing of all life on this planet. When we thrive in a restored, safe, and vibrant natural environment because we have learned to give back as much as we are given. And when we have a voice over our collective destiny and find belonging, meaning, and purpose through genuine connection to the people and planet that sustain us. Relocalizing our economy will be critical. Growing, harvesting, and preserving food locally, making and repairing clothing and shelter, weaving, fabric making, pottery and other crafting skills, and to reduce our dependence on vehicle travel. We need to build community connection and care through things like tool sharing, local currencies, a walk-bike friendly community, the barter economy, repair clinics, and time banking. We need to spark entrepreneurship through cooperatives, employee-owned businesses, direct public offerings, and mentoring. Don Hall was a former director of the Transition Towns organization in the United States, and he took a couple years off to write a book called The Regeneration Handbook, Transform Yourself to Transform the World. And a quote from his book states, "History has entered the planetary phase of civilization, a profound shift in the condition of society and the dynamics driving change. Yet the worldviews and institutions of the past persist. At the same time, local initiatives, post-consumerist subcultures, sustainability and justice campaigns, public awareness and concern, and visions of another world may portend a rising social force for addressing the systemic challenge of the planetary phase. Ashley Hodgson is an associate professor of economics. She's currently writing a book on a concept she calls the New Enlightenment, paradigm shifts in economics, governance, and knowledge. She asks, how could we rejigger these systems to be more aligned with values and goals conducive to supporting humans long into the future? What are the natural laws that inherently depreciate systems, and how might we think about counteracting them? As we enter a world where the perpetual growth we've come to expect is no longer possible, how can we lean into the creativity and ingenuity required when thinking about new economic paradigms? Don, Ashley, and I are offering a workshop on July 25th from 9 o'clock to 3 p.m. at the Rochester International Event Center. The title of the workshop is Transitioning to a Resilient and Sustainable Future. The cost is $125, which includes lunch, drinks, and snacks. The workshop objectives are to delve into the current environmental, economic, and social polycrisis, how to prepare for potential black swan events, how to envision a holistic and inspiring future, and creating a framework for transitioning to a resilient and sustainable future. People who should attend include solutions-oriented community members, local leaders, elected officials, business owners, municipal and school administrators, emergency and disaster response professionals, and anyone interested in being better prepared for a very different future. We hope to see you there. I hope you can join Don and Ashley and myself and your peers at the workshop. And if you have any questions about the workshop, or if you'd like me to give this presentation to your group, just reach out to me, ivanitso@gmail.com. Otherwise, I hope to see you there, and as we try to figure out how to create a more resilient and sustainable future for future generations. Thank you.